Hey everyone, Gene here. Welcome back to the Evil Within. This is an Akumu, no upgrade, no locker, no flashbolt, no freeze bolt playthrough on the PS4, and we're on chapter 9. I went ahead and skipped all the opening cutscenes because they take a couple minutes and I just wanted to get right to the action. So you start out in this mansion looking building and very reminiscent of Resident Evil, and you want to go left so that you can activate this first. There's basically 3 puzzles you have to solve, and you want to activate this first one over here. And that enemy I knocked over with the trap, but I didn't have any matches and I didn't realize it, so I was trying to burn him without any matches. So it was kind of a waste because I ended up having to use the handgun to get headshots anyway. So I wasted 2 potential trap parts when I shot the dynamite, but he didn't really give me any trouble, so it doesn't really matter. And a lot of enemies in this stage drop axes, so you're going to want to use those. And right there I picked up a flashbolt, so I just shot it at the wall to throw it away. Yeah, right here there's an audio log of Ruvik speaking, and he'll say which part of the brain he's operating on, and you just have to poke the part of the brain he's referencing. I can never remember, as much as I've done this chapter and played this game, I always have to look at the paper to see where it's at. So this chapter is kind of like chapter 3, where enemy spawns and positions are going to be a little different. They're kind of random. Sometimes this enemy doesn't come out of this door, for example. He just doesn't exist, or he comes by later. But if he does, there's a bottle sitting right there on that little dresser or whatever that is, so you can just grab it, throw it at his head, get a free kill. So after you're done down there and you do that little puzzle, you want to come in these double doors and grab this safe dial here. There's nothing else in this room, I don't believe, so I would just get out and then get going, because Ruvik can spawn in this stage, and it's actually really annoying because you can't hurt him, so you just have to run away, which you'll see here in a second. But for now, there's 2 enemies in this library area, and I'm waiting for them both to be by the door so I can kick it open and affect both of them. And I had the axe, and I thought I was going to wait for them to stand up, but then I thought, well, everything in this game has such a giant hitbox, I wonder if I can just hit them both on the ground. And that's exactly what I did. And as you can see, it turned both of their heads into mush. So pretty much any one-time use item in this game has a massive hitbox. Remember that. The bottle, the axe, the torch, shooting barrels, hay bales, everything has a giant hitbox because you can only use it once. And right there, that enemy, like I talked about with these enemy placements kind of being random, sometimes that guy can be on this side, and sometimes he cannot even be up here. And then that enemy is chasing me, and I honestly don't even know where he came from. So I'm just kind of getting away from him right now. What I'm doing now is I'm running ahead because I want to activate this checkpoint, which activates when you go to the second puzzle. And I want to do this now because I don't want Ruvik to show up, because if an enemy's chasing me and Ruvik starts chasing me and there's a trap in that hallway, I could be caught in a bad spot. So I just wanted to go activate the trap. Or no, activate the checkpoint, not the trap. So that's what I'm doing. Ruvik's still going to show up before this chapter ends, but at least I get to this pretty unscathed, so. As much as I like this chapter, I do think the whole thing with Ruvik was a really missed opportunity. So basically he shows up for about 30 seconds, and he chases you, and he kills you in one hit, and you can't hurt him. I get that it's supposed to be kind of a throwback to horror games having that like stalker enemy like Nemesis or whatever, but it's just not done well here at all. Like, this is one of the only complaints I have about this game, is that him appearing just is handled so poorly. Like, some games have a lot of great ideas and have good mechanics, and you just think, wow, this game needs an editor, basically. And I think this game is very, for the most part, free of things like that, but I wish someone would have just stepped up and been like, yeah, that was not a good idea, let's just remove that, because it makes exploring this chapter annoying, knowing that he can show up and then you can't do anything to him, because when all of this game's depth and intrigue comes from its combat, and you can't utilize any of that against him, then it's like, why even include it? So I'm going to go back the way I came to grab a couple resources. There's a lot of traps lying around this place. There's a few matches in this room, which I definitely want to grab because I don't have any. And then when you come in this room and you grab those matches, 2 enemies are going to come up from behind you, and I'm just running away from them because I want to go activate the 3rd puzzle, which will get us to part 2 of the chapter. Even though there's kind of a lot of ground to cover in this chapter, there's really not that many enemies. So it kind of feels like old Resident Evil in that sense, where you're walking around a big interconnected environment with just a few enemies blocking your path here and there. So definitely a throwback in that regard. This enemy I don't think gets up if you try to leave. I could be wrong because I always burn him, but I was going to say I don't think using that match is really necessary. Sometimes an enemy will bust out of that door right there that was boarded up too. So always have to watch in this chapter because you never know where enemies are going to come from. Once you're done up here, you want to head downstairs, and instead of going left, you want to go right. And see right there, that enemy, I was not expecting him to appear, so I wanted to bait out one of his grabs and then get a hit to the head with the bottle for a sneak kill. Because when an enemy goes for their grab, they have a pretty big recovery, so that's the best time to use the bottle, is right after they try to grab you, because they usually are standing still after that, so that's the best opportunity to go for that. In this room, there's an enemy in the back, and she's kind of hidden by this curtain or whatever's hanging. And if you start walking for a few steps and then start crouch walking, you can catch up to her before she turns around, because she's programmed to turn around basically right after you enter that room. And then here there's a trap placed behind these boxes, so just smash them, and then there's a trap part inside of it, and then there's a trap behind it. So right now I'm pretty stocked on supplies. I have sniper ammo, I have full shotgun ammo, I have almost full handgun ammo, and 4 matches. So I'm doing pretty well. And I have a decent amount of trap parts, not a ton, but I have a decent amount. And this chapter doesn't end on a boss, it ends on a chase sequence and then I would say like a mid-sized fight in a very small area. And when the fights are in small areas, they tend to be a little bit easier because of the trap potential of the bolts. You can take advantage of the enemy spawns and the placements a lot easier. And there's a trick to dealing with that last fight with the enemy spawns that I think is really cool that I'm going to show you how to do. And for anyone who happens to be watching this and is wondering, this is not a speed run, so I'm not going for a world record speed run or anything like that. I mostly want to show strategies for the combat, and especially under certain circumstances like no upgrades and no flash bolts, because I know there's runs out there where people will upgrade their shock bolt or their flash bolt to max and just use that stun time to really just get past some of the harder fights. And I think this game is generally pretty good about not letting players cheese stuff or abuse things, but that is one thing that players always do on speedruns, and I wanted to elaborate on the combat more. Also, that being said, aside from that path I take to fight Laura in Chapter 5, nothing I've gotten from this playthrough I've gotten from other YouTubers or other players. I referenced some of the damage numbers I referenced are from a Reddit post where someone uncovered the game's damage numbers. But other than that, I didn't take strats or anything from any players. So I'm sure there's more efficient ways to do some of this stuff, but I'm just showing you guys kind of what I do and how I think about things. So here there's going to be a series of scripted parts where you have to dodge some traps and run away from an enemy. It's definitely important that you grab that shock bolt right there. As soon as you get control, you can just turn to the right and grab that bolt off the table. Definitely important. I'm going to use it in the the ending to this chapter where there's that bigger fight. Since it's in such a small area, like I said, shock bolts are pretty much your best friend in small rooms where the enemies are, where it's mostly haunted. And right here, this monster you have to run away from. You can't fight it in any way. So you just have to blow past it. You run off to the right. And then it's going to start a different chase sequence. Watching this footage again, this chapter is really not as long or difficult as I always remember it being. I remember this being one of the more elaborate chapters in the game, and it's really not. I think it just kind of gives off that impression since you can go multiple ways in the mansion. But there's very few enemies. It's kind of like the last chapter where when you really step back and look at it, you realize there's just very few enemies in the whole chapter, especially compared to the next two chapters. Chapter 10 has more enemies, and then chapter 11 is just constant action, and it's very long. It's like chapter 6 in that regard. But what sucks is that it seems like a lot of people hate chapter 11. Like chapters 11 and 12 are the infamous chapters in this game. In chapter 12 I can kind of understand, but chapter 11 I think is just great, so I can't wait for that one. So this part, I think this part's awesome. The imagery here is great. Kind of reminds me of Berserk in a way. Not quite as messed up and freaky, but it's getting there. So then you step in here and these grates are going to fall and it's going to start a chase sequence. There's going to be bear traps and dynamite all along this route. Definitely disarm them so you can get your trap parts. I couldn't remember if you could melee those or not, so I was trying. I didn't think you could. And either way, shooting it looks cooler, so why not do that, right? So this thing likes to spawn in front of you. So if you run backwards a little bit, it'll kind of like chase you for a little bit and then dissolve and then come back in a different spot. So I'm kind of luring it around just so I can get all these trap parts. And I'm going to have a lot by the time the next chapter rolls around. So I'm going to have a lot of freedom in which bolts I can make, so how I can go about things. This right here, those spinning blades, they look like they can hit you, but they can't as long as you're near that wall. So don't worry about getting hit by those. And that ends that. You just run towards the screen, and then the big fight's gonna start. I don't know everything about this game's story. There's actually a lot that I still think is confusing, and I will probably never understand because honestly I just probably won't ever look it up either. But I like this part of the game's story, like this whole sequence where you go into the barn and you see them being burned. I almost feel like, despite this game coming out in 2014, which isn't that long ago, that if they tried to do this scene in 2020, this probably just wouldn't fly. I mean, watching children being burned or whatever in a flashback, even though it's not really them, you're seeing like their kind of like this weird recollection of them. Still, this part of the story is cool because you see that how much fire traumatized Ruvik, and then everything is weak against fire in this game. Like fire is like the end game of the combat. You want to catch everything on fire, so that's really cool. And then the environment you fight in is on fire as well. So I think that part of the plot's cool. I like that one of the themes of the plot is tied into the mechanics so heavily, as well as the traps. Like he made traps and he experimented on people, and then there's traps lying around the entire game kind of thing. But yeah, this is the scene. Because when I got back into playing this game a few months ago, I was like, wow, I just can't imagine a big publisher allowing a scene like this to happen in a game today, which is so sad to even say. Like, big publishers shouldn't get a say in what the developers put into their games and put into their stories. I don't think the artists should do what they want. If they have a vision, if they want to do something, they should be doing it. And I get it, the publisher's the one making the risk with funding the game and all that, but whatever, that's a different topic. Anyway, there's two cranks over here you have to mess with, and then you go up top and it's going to initiate the fight after that. So in this fight coming up, I'm going to say this now because the fight ends pretty quickly. That like blood monster thing that was chasing you in the last section, it's gonna be in this section, and it's one of those things where it's gonna be hanging out and it's gonna be intimidating. But you can really end this fight before that thing even moves. So if you use the traps and if you just take care of the spawn points, you don't even have to worry about the thing getting near you. You barely even have to really like move at all. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Make sure you have handgun ammo if you want to do this trick. You could use other tricks too, but again, without flash bolts and with usually I'd use a freeze bolt here, honestly, but I'm not using that. So these enemies are going to spawn out in front of that monster thing. If you shoot them with the handgun while they're rising up, it's going to stun them and it's going to make them fall back down. And for some reason, their heads are just popping off super easily, for whatever reason. See that? I'm hitting them in the head, and they're just falling right back down. So as long as you just shoot them, you're not even going to give them a chance to do anything. And then throw 2 matches, and I light, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them on fire. That guy's going for a desperation attack, so I have to run to the other side. I really wouldn't have had to do that had he not gone for that attack. I probably could have just stood still and that fight would have ended 10 seconds sooner. So that's it for the combat in that chapter. There's honestly not that many enemies. There's no alter egos. There's no doppelgangers. I don't even know if were there any fatties in that level? I don't think so. Wasn't a whole lot. Pretty easy chapter, really. Next 2 chapters, though, are really intense. So I'll be getting to those soon. If you like the video and you want to see more, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.